All right, let's get started. Hi, everyone. Thanks for making it to this session of the Ledger Lab webinar. So we are obviously excited to have you with us. For the ones who don't know me, I'm Clam, co-founder and CTO at Formance. I've been fortunate enough to work in the fintech industry for more than 10 years. I work on complex payment systems, high-scale transaction processing systems, and we are turning 5 this summer as Formance a company, so we got to celebrate that as well. But we're excited to tell you more today about our studio component, given that as part of this whole journey of figuring out payment flows, building on ledgers, building ledgering systems, it's pretty hard as a builder to get a good sense of how to explore the solution space, how to design good chart of accounts, good transaction systems for third-party funds. So this session is going to be dedicated to showing a bit of what we're putting in your hands to let you explore ledgering systems and how to design them. So I'm soon gonna kick it over to Finn, our solution engineer, and we are also joined by Olivia in the webinar, who is leading our marketing operations. So thanks everyone for making it to this one. We're going to have a quick presentation, roughly 20 minutes on the studio or work on AI, designing chart of accounts, let you explore that through a live build. And then we are going to open the floor for questions. All right, so kicking it over to Finn. Finn, take it away.
Great. Yeah. Thanks, Clem. Thanks everyone for joining. My name's Finn. I am a solutions engineer here at Formance. Been with the company for over a year now. And so currently I typically work on the pre-sale solutions engineering part of the company. But previously I was also helping on the post-sales part. And so one of the difficulties we noticed was actually educating people in how to actually work and adapt Formance to their flow of funds. Because obviously everyone knows that they need a core ledger in the fintech space, but what becomes hard is actually mapping out these flows and understanding what it drives for you. So what we ended up building was something called the Formance Studio, which I'll be demoing today. And the idea is that you can put in your company name, or even describe a product that doesn't exist yet, and the output will be something that is mapped to Formance. And so to make this more concrete, today I'm going to be pretending like I work at the company Venmo, since I consider that a lot of people might know this one. And we'll see how you might be able to map these flows out. And in the end, I'll actually show you how you can deploy it to a Formance sandbox. So really the goal is to be able to allow people to get from 0 to 1 a lot quicker using Formance. And so I'll go ahead and share my screen now and we can jump right into it. All right, so what I'm showing here is what you'll see after you log in to the Formance Studio. And so the first thing you'll see is obviously ledger schemas. So what is a ledger schema? A schema in Formance is a way to define what your chart of accounts looks like. That's going to be places you could store balances. And so in Venmo, that might be my available balance, maybe what's pending withdrawal, pending transfers, things like this. And we'll make it more concrete as we walk through it. Um, You'll also be able to see transactional templates, which I think for me is the most useful part. And I'll dive in more about why it's useful in Formance, but high level, it's going to be the ability to write this out using NumScript, which is Formance's DSL that we've created to easily model payments. And the last part that's useful is actually defining queries up front. I find this one super useful for finance folks, FinOps people who want to be able to execute queries day after day, whether that's resolving pending payments, routing suspense funds, and things like this. So now that we know what a schema is, let's pretend that we work at Venmo. I log into this, and what I can see is maybe I want to start from a business like mine. So I can see a bunch of different options here. And continually week over week, we update these to make sure that they're up to date, and then we also add new ones as the market develops. But once again, let's pretend I'm Venmo, and maybe I want to start with the neobank FBO schema here. So what I'll do is I can tap into this, and you'll see the thing that's going to pop up immediately is it's going to say, okay, how can I make this neobank more like Venmo, the one that I work at? And so what I can do is I could type in venmo.com, and that's the website that I want to adapt. And so what I'll do is I can just click adapt. Right now, I could watch it run. I'm not going to do that right now because it's going to take a little bit. Let me go back to previous runs here. Let me go back to the FBO. And so if I go back to this FBO thing here, we'll see that before I adapted it, here's what you receive just right off the bat. And this is adaptable to any company that is maybe structured like a neobank FBO. We can see the chart of accounts. And once again, you'll see that maybe I have customers. For me, it might be my ID, Finn in this case, and I might have an available balance here. And that would be where this is stored, where my available money is stored. Um, Also, I mentioned transactions. And so you can imagine I might want to be able to do an ACH direct deposit, let's say. On top of this, we have the queries as well. And so this might be a daily FBO reconciliation. And so that's the concept of rolling up all of the accounts that exist in the FBO, all of those user sums, operational balances, and then making sure that it actually equals what you have externally at that bank. And then my favorite part, which I'll save for more towards the end of this call, is going to be the deploy button. What that does is it takes this schema and it actually deploys it to a real sandbox informant. So it'll create a ledger for you and it will apply this schema to you. Um, but obviously, this is going to be more templatized. I think this is useful for exploring. What I think is the most useful part, though, is actually being able to map it to your specific company here. And so I showed you before that you can start a run and you can map it to yours. So if you want to start from scratch rather than a template, I could click start a run here. I could go ahead and name it Venmo. And I could say, okay, I'm modeling a core ledger for Venmo.com, do some research, and come back with a schema for me. I could then upload some documents if I'd like. And if I want to get more advanced, I can scroll down here and I can select what model I use. Right now, we're using Opus 5, so it's pretty up to date there. And then one of the parts that I typically like to turn on is the ask clarifying questions here. So if I select that, I can click design and the model will kick off and it'll come back to me when the questions are ready. Obviously, we don't want to sit around and wait for this on the webinar. So I'll navigate over to a previous run where I ran the same thing. And I can see that this has now come back to me with a couple questions here. And it's saying, okay, here's what I found. We know that Venmo's is a payment app. It's not a bank, it's a neobank. This is how money enters. And then some things that you could clarify on is which products should this first version cover? And so I could say, I just want it to be person to person payments, for instance. And so I could go ahead and approve that. The reason I'm bringing that up is because Venmo has shifted into crypto balances. They've shifted into being able to pay cross country. And so if I just want to start from something simple, then I go ahead and tell the agent that. And so I can go ahead and click approve here, and we can see it's kicked off again, the design stage. So obviously I've more talked about, okay, this is how you can use it. But I think a useful thing to understand is what is actually happening here and how do we design a system like this? And really what it is it's 5 years of knowledge condensed into something that the agent can then execute. And so we've been doing post sales engineering at Formance for about 5 years now, and with that comes the expertise that is knowing how to take a company's questions and map that to a decent chart of accounts. A good chart of accounts is something that can answer every question you want to be able to be answered, as well as build audit trails and then actually operate successfully at the scale you need it to. And so with those three pillars, we've come up with a couple skills, principles that we think make the best chart of accounts. And so we've put this into the skill, and that's actually what the agent is running behind the scenes. And since it's such a vast depth of knowledge here, the runs will take usually around 30 minutes. But for me, it really is worth it because obviously investing in a ledger here is worth the time. So it's not going to be a snap call right back and the ledger's done. You'll have to wait around 30 minutes and then you'll receive the schema. So we can see here, let's navigate to Venmo. Here's going to be one that's actually finished here. And so I can see I'm modeling it for Venmo. I only want to monitor the virtual accounts here. And any flows that have to do with that, don't worry about auxiliary businesses like the crypto side. When I go ahead and open this, I can now see that it's come up with a suitable chart of accounts here. I can see custody available here, platform maybe I'm working with, Bank Corp. I can see maybe I want to recognize revenue for fees. But let's take a look at the 26 transactions it came up with. Maybe we want to check out, let's look at a more complex one. Maybe, yeah, direct deposit reversed. And so this is the concept of maybe I upload some money and now I actually want to revert it, or there was some problem and I want to completely unwind what just happened. Well, this agent actually thought about really the unhappy case too, that is the reversal, and came up and mapped out what that ledger posting is. I think this is super important to bring up because obviously I think it's easy to map the happy flows. What becomes hard and really where the value is earned with the ledger is mapping the unhappy flows with that this agent is actually very um, solid at. And so we can see this is mapped out and we actually link it back to that same deposit ID, which will then build an audit trail for us. So obviously we can see the use case there. And this is going to be the simple one where I told it not to do crypto. But if I navigate back out and I go to previous runs here, and let's do Venmo exhaustive. And this is a different one where I said, let's try it again for Venmo, but let's be exhaustive and let's cover every single product that they offer. So if I open the editor here, we're going to see a much more fleshed out chart of accounts. If I hit on transactions, I see now 49 as opposed to the 20 something that was on the previous one. And we're going to see some things like the crypto custody in here. And let's just take a look at that. So we could see cash a check, for instance. That was not in the old one. We could see, let's search for crypto here. Looks like it's more towards the bottom. Yeah, so we have crypto buy initiate. And so you'll see I didn't tell the agent to actually scope this out by itself. I just said be exhaustive and research these different flows. And obviously, I just inputted the company name. So you can imagine if you upload your PRDs, specify your flow of funds, just how good the output is going to be. And so we've seen a lot of our customers or prospects that are eyeing maybe the open source, they find a ton of leverage in using the studio. And that's because obviously they're an expert in their company. They know how they want the money to move. They know how they want to build the product, but they do not have the expertise that we at Formance have on the ledgering side. So what they'll do is they'll leverage the studio to build out this flow of funds chart of accounts so that they can continue working on the product. And the studio can come up with a very suitable V1 design for the chart of accounts to begin with. So yeah, this is great and everything, okay, but how do you take it one step further? What I'm showing here is a static UI, um, which is great and everything, and it helps me understand, okay, how is this modeled in Formance? But how can we take it another step further? And so yeah, we asked ourselves the same question. And the way that we really decided to make this easy is a one-click deploy button here. And so when I click on deploy here, let's call it Venmo exhaustive 2. What's going to happen here behind the scenes, it's going to spin up a stack, which is basically an isolated deployment of Formance. It's then going to create a ledger, and it's going to link this schema we've created to that ledger. And so the idea here is that you can go from this designing environment to something that's actually workable in Formance's console. So I'll go ahead and select deploy here. And I can see that it's deploying, it's queued and everything. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to navigate to the console. So I'll open in the console. It's going to re-authenticate here. And let's go to the demo I have pulled up, select the ledger here, all ledgers, and I can see that that Venmo exhaustive ledger name was created here. I can see it was created at 11:20, that's 1 minute ago. And we can go ahead and see that the schema was actually appended to this ledger. And so if I select in, I can see that that same 49 transactional templates, those same queries, and actually that same chart of accounts. And so now you've really linked the design stage to actually how can I start tooling around, poking around with this from a developer standpoint. And so once again, our main goal here is to make it as easy as possible to start playing around with Formance and being able to see that flow of funds live. Um, and obviously, I keep bringing up these transactional templates and why I think they're useful. But really, what is I think one of the key parts about this is the flexibility in how you work with NumScript here. So you can see like I have now parameterized these flows, or the agent itself has come up and thought that this is a suitable parameter. And so if I have add cash in store, I can see that this customer ID comes in from a parameter. And so what you can do now is you can use the Formance API to say, I want to call this template, which is add cash in store, and I want to pass in the parameter that is maybe Fin or Clem customer ID, and it can handle everything else, like the math saying it wants to hold a maximum of a load fee for the platform and revenue here. You could even put it in as a percentage. So the idea here is that we want to build maintainability over time. And so as opposed to managing a different JSON or template for every single user that pays in, we think you should only manage one and parameterize that same script. So for 1 million users that log in, call the same, or for 1 million users that deposit cash, call the same script and then just change the customer ID that they're using there. And so this really helps with maintainability over time. And lastly, you would be able to actually save these queries um, to the console itself. And so if I go over to transactions here, I can see that maybe I have different transactions specified here, and then queries themselves, I can navigate in, and you'd even have the ability to run the query live in the console, which I've seen is super nice from, once again, the financial side. Someone that might not have that engineering background, but still wants some information about the ledger data. And so I've seen it's very helpful for, once again, that reconciliation piece, resolving pending accounts, hold accounts, suspense accounts. Um, and more on the card side, something that I've found super interesting is having the ability to filter on, let's say, off old accounts for the cards and say, hey, Formance, give me any authorization charge that is maybe older than 2 days that is still pending. Because obviously we know that's an issue. So I know, yeah, that's a lot of information to process, but that's really the high level overview I wanted to give today. The final point I want to make is everything I just showed today is fully free out of the box. So you can go into Studio, you can log in, and you can actually start executing your design today, deploy it to the sandbox, and you don't have to pay a cent for that. And so I really would encourage people to do that. because it really gives you a head start in evaluating if you want to improve your core ledger. And obviously, you can then take that schema and deploy it self-hosted using our open source ledger. And so you would have deployed a um, an entire chart of accounts schema on-prem using our open source ledger fully from scratch without spending a cent there. So I'll open up. I'll pass it back to Clem, and then I think we can open the floor up to questions here.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you, Finn, for the demo here. Uh, as Finn mentioned, the whole idea of the studio thing is to help you with the first bottleneck that we find when designing this complex ledgering system, which is mostly the blank page syndrome of like, where do I even start? Like, how do I start like thinking in terms of what is an account, what is a transaction, how many of them should there be? And what we want to give you with that studio is really this ability to explore at least a first solution that you can iterate from there instead of staying stuck in this design mode. And the outcome that we want you to have is indeed this static schema, which we have found very valuable for team collaborations so that you can have your finance team and engineering team speaking the same language, understanding what is the end of day to process payments out amounts, for example, and we found real value in having these queries, these transactions really determined in advance, version controlled as well, so that you can know when a definition of something changes instead of having three, four, five different versions of what is the end of day balance of a user floating around through your different teams in the company. So that's what we want to leave you with. So I think with the studio, what we address is really this first bottleneck of ideating and thinking what is an account and what is a transaction. Just before we open up the floor to question, maybe just a first quick question for you all as ledger practitioners. Like, I'd love to learn a bit more about what is your biggest bottleneck besides ideating when designing a new ledger today, when you're thinking about getting started. We will show a poll on the screen so that we can get your input on this one, and then we'll open up the floor to questions. All right, let's wrap up the call. Just a minute to let everyone think this one through. Mm. Okay, so definitely a lot of you were saying a strong bottleneck in translating product requirements. Um, Obviously, it is an interesting outcome for us because this is basically what it can give to the studio today. So that's great to hear. So I would encourage all of you who answer this first one to give it a try. And obviously, all of the other bottlenecks are interesting as well. We definitely see this whole process of unearthing a ledger as quite an undertaking. So hopefully this first piece of tooling helps you with the first one. And we'll now open it up to questions.
I see Scott has a question in the chat. So he says, in terms of generation of the chart of accounts, is there a simple way to ingest a chart of accounts provided by my accounting team, for example, in JSON or CSV format, so the schema in the ledger matches that of accounting chart of accounts? So good question, first off. And right now, that box that you could drop in documents to, right now it only accepts PDFs and text files. So we're working on a change right now to be able to support different types of documents. But that's exactly sort of the flow we want people to take here. So we don't want this to just turn into a black box. We want it to be something that your team can understand. And so I would highly recommend that you do upload documents like that, because it allows that agent to understand how you're actually thinking about architecting this. And so I would say definitely upload it. You could do a PDF or text file right now. And then you could sort of say, okay, these are the asset accounts, these are the liability accounts. And then the agent will know to tag those with metadata, saying which ones are assets and liabilities, which I guess more downstream becomes super useful because we see almost all of our customers will take this core ledger data and then roll it up into something like NetSuite at the end of the day. And so architecting these queries um, using assets, liabilities becomes a lot easier.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Finn. We have a question from Zvi in the chat. So go ahead. You can take it away.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Thanks for the webinar. I mean, learning a lot more about the system and its use. I am wondering though, what happens when and if the agentic designer gets something wrong? How do we go in to catch it, correct it? And if you could expand on that.
Yeah, good question. And it's a good one to call out here because obviously no LLM system should be trusted with 100% certainty when we're talking about things like moving money. And so the reason again why we design the studio is not to say this is going to give you a production grade ledger design. It's more to say, okay, here's a starting point for you so that the page doesn't need to be blank. The next part is going to have to be somewhat of a human tested thing. And so what I recommend to do is actually take the chart of accounts, the transactional templates that it outputs, and start seeing if you can answer those questions. So start modeling, like say, I want to call this direct deposit. Can I use a query to actually roll up the balances here that I need or build an audit trail? And if you can't, then you can go ahead and go back to that agentic designer and say, hey, I'm missing this question that I need, or maybe I'm missing this audit trail. And you can continue to iterate on these until you're in a working state. Um, but yeah, really the check really needs to happen from a human. And I think that is important, especially in the fintech industry.
That makes a lot of sense. So it's more of a template to work off of, and then the human looks at it rather than, just trusting every single aspect to the agentic design, correct?
Yes, exactly. So the end stage of giving that check is going to be a human at the end of the day.
Great. Thank you.
Fantastic. Uh, so we have another question in the chat from Yuri, which is what should I avoid doing when working on an agent in a studio, and how do you tell how to essentially talk to the agent to get a good outcome for this design stage? That's a very good question. Internally, we use a system that we call intent-based finance to derive this to transform product requirements to chart of accounts and ledger schemas. It's good to do indeed, and the agent will try to get you there. But it's good to do what you started to hint in the chat, which is to really make sure you have a good communication about the different entities and events that happen in your system. So typically, events in your system will turn into transactions in the ledger, and entities in your system will turn into accounts in the ledger. So if you're building this Venmo type of platform, an entity will typically be a user, and an event will typically be user requested payout. And as you list this out, you start to have a good conception of all the entities that happen to hold the balance in the ledgering system, and all the business events in your domain that happen to also be somewhat transactable and be part of the ledgering system. So it's good to provide a bit of context on who are the actors in your system, the different entities, whether it is like a person, an institution, or even an internal domain object. So if you're building a ride-sharing app, even a ride will be this kind of entity that is likely to hold a balance and be transactable. So entities and events are a good start, and the agent will try to get you there. And another hint of what you can really emphasize on in your chats with the agent and driving it is making sure that you also factor in the different questions you will want to answer from your core ledger, things such as the report that you'll need to produce at the end of the month, each day, at all time. This ledger system is going to have to answer a lot of questions for a lot of people. So if you get your hands on what the different teams will need to ask this ledger, in all likeliness, the engineering team and the app is going to need something like is going to need to be able to ask something such as what is the actual balance of this user, and then another team will likely need to be able to answer a question which is what is our total outstanding liabilities towards all users. And as you list those out, like you can just throw them in the chat with the agent, and that will drive it in the right direction. So that's a good starting point, and and yeah, you can then take it away and iterate from that.
Yeah, and I see there's another
Okay.
one quick follow-up
Yeah.
from Yuri about how hard migration is. And so for me, there's sort of two schools of thought here about changes to the ledger. One is going to be, okay, am I changing the account names themselves? And so maybe like I have Fin wallet available and I want to change it to be like users Fin wallet available. A change like that, you'll need to perform some sort of migration on. And the reason is because you don't want to lose history in a core ledger system. And that's because auditors are going to come knocking on the door and they're going to demand audit trails for all your users. And if you can't prove that, well, then you're sort of in a tough spot there. So that's the kind of change that's going to be something you need to perform an actual migration on. The second school of thought is, okay, we have this ledger now. We like the chart of accounts, but now we want to introduce a new flow. And so this one is actually a good bit easier in Formance. And the reason is because accounts are created dynamically. And so let's say the old flow was when a user deposits, it goes right to their account. Now, the new flow I want to add is I want to take a portion as a fee for the platform. Well, this is something that's very easy to add because all I'm doing is adding an account here. And so I start recognizing fees. I move to that account and it's created on the fly. And I don't need to perform a migration, and Formance handles the rest. And we keep the audit trail whole. So those are the two schools of thoughts. One is definitely easier than the other, but they're both possible.
Yeah, we definitely encourage all of these changes to be visible through the trail, which is also the reason why these schemas are versioned in the ledger, and you cannot just override the schema without telling anyone, and it will be visible in the trail of the ledger that you changed the schema, and you might have changed a query or transaction. This is a highly an information of high value, and this is why it's visible in the system. Okay. Perfect. Glad this answers it. Any last question from the panel participants? Okay, cool. Seems like we are gonna be wrapping this up. Um, Thanks again, everyone, for making it. It's really important for us to share all the knowledge that we accumulate, especially as a company with strong roots in open source and practitioners of OSS software. It's really important for us to make all of this fuzzy knowledge that's really hard to access available on tap, basically, instead of through gated NDAs and PDFs. So hopefully this tool helps you explore and build, and we are going to share the recording and links with every attendee. So thanks again for making it, and looking forward to the next one.
Thanks, everyone.
Cheers.